where they look good.
All right, let's get ready for some Thursday night football on No House Advantage. Pete McCarthy here on the Stokastic DFS channel, along with Geoff Ulrich. We've got Tyler Zander producing. Give us a like, subscribe, get involved in the show. You can ask some questions in the chat, and we'll get it all fired up. It should be an exciting matchup tonight. Dolphins, Bengals, a little better than what we had last week at that Steelers-Browns mess of a game, Geoff.
Yeah, should be better, right? I mean, that's what we were talking about before. Like this one, if this one busts, then we're, if this is like 17-10 boring game, I mean, I don't know what we're going to do here. I have to go back to watching like Friends reruns on Thursday, but yeah, I'm excited for this game. I think it's going to tell us a little bit about these teams. Feels like a tough spot for Miami coming in, but they got elite wide receivers. Got elite wide receivers all over the place. Miami's been giving up a ton of yards, but also winning games. Feels like another spot though, where, the opponents are going to be able to put up a lot of yards against Miami. And I don't know. We got some big props on No House. Obviously we're going to be talking about, but free projections over there, guys. And I know that we kind of slept. The projections kind of swept the board in a lot of ways in the last game, and that the unders just hit at a pretty huge rate. There was a couple overs in there. I think CeeDee Lamb got over his total, but for the most part, again, like, the projections just in general, like really just giving you a good roadmap of kind of where you want to go with these No House Advantage props. So check those out. And, we'll go through obviously the best ones here in the next half hour.
And that's all free. You go to stokastic.com and go to NFL and projections, and then go down to the No House Advantage area there. And you can check that all out for free and see what our projections are, median projections, the chances of that particular prop coming through. And then we'll work through, what correlates, what lines up with what works in a certain game script, and how you get a little different as well with the way the No House Advantage is set up. And if you haven't played on No House Advantage before, we'll tell you all about it over the course of the next few minutes. I told you, subscribe, like the video. Once you do subscribe, make sure to hit that notification button. You get alerts when our shows go live. You can also check out today's free premium tools and data, which are MLB player projections. And if you're still playing MLB DFS, as I am, don't forget that everything we have to offer for MLB night slates on DraftKings is also 100% free for the remainder of the season. That's going to give you a great chance to give our tools a shot before you purchase. You got the postseason coming up. A week from tomorrow that starts up. So just click the DK Night Owl link to check out tonight's tools and projections. As far as what we're working with at No House Advantage, 3 contests tonight, $15 entry on one, 15 grand to first place, 2,400 total entries there. And on these Thursday nights, they haven't filled yet this year. So you might have some big overlay there. That's bigger than it was last week. Maybe a more enticing matchup, I guess, with Bengals Dolphins, but certainly something to keep an eye on there. You don't want to go up to $15. You got a $5 entry, $1,000 to first place there. Basics of this game: the Bengals are a 3.5-point favorite, over under 48.5 points. Weather not a factor, 60 degrees, clear and calm in Cincinnati, so that should be just fine. Any big feels about this game, Geoff? I mean, I tend to like Miami in this spot too. Tagovailoa is expected to play, which is very good news for Miami. Some key losses on defense for the Bengals. DJ Reader is going to be out for at least a month, it sounds like. So, what are some of your big feels in terms of how you're walking into this game? Yeah.
So again, the wide receivers, I think are like kind of like where we can start looking at it. Although let's start with this. Let's start with what we like on No House Advantage. What is like really popping off for us. And, there's, again, one thing about No House is they definitely give us bigger prop lines, over unders. And we're seeing that again with some of these players. Samaje Perine, 19.5 rushing yards. He just does not get many rush attempts. He might, his I don't know what his average is, but it's like 2 or 3 rush attempts per game. So asking him to go for 20 rush yards, could it happen? Could Joe Mixon get injured, or they just go with Perine for a drive and he gets 5 carries and goes over this? Yeah, but
that's what happened last week. So last week, Mixon hurt his ankle and missed some time. So Perine came in. He ran for 47 yards against the Jets. He had a positive game script with the Bengals well ahead at that time as well. But you look at the previous games, he has not had opportunities. Mixon is expected to be healthy tonight. So, yeah, even though it's not a high total, that's certainly one you could jump on the under.
Yeah. And again, like we have that project. It's just too high. It's just, again, his medium is far below that. So that's one. I mean, and then Chase Edmonds on the other side, his rushing total is 40.5. He's projected around 30 to 32 yards at most sites. So we know that it's basically a split. I think it's going to fluctuate. I don't think Edmonds is necessarily going to be like the second back every week. I know last week everyone's like, oh my God, Mostert's taking over this backfield. I really think it's just going to split every week. And I think by the end of the year, it's going to be 50-50. But 40.5 yards rushing for a dude who's been more of a pass catching back most of his career. And I also again, the Bengals are the underdogs here. I think that Edmonds has a good chance of smashing some props as a receiver, but like as a rusher here with Mostert, kind of the better early down back anyways, that's tough. So those two really just jumping off the page. Just wanted to start with those two because they're pretty obvious. They're projecting a solid like 10 to 7 plays for us. They're going to be obvious plays for people, but like I feel good about both of them. I actually feel better about the Edmonds line, to be honest, because as we mentioned, like P. Ryan is the backup. Like if something happens to Mixon or they just give him a 2-minute drill, it could get there. But like Edmonds to get there, like he also needs the proper game flow. And I just don't think it's going to be there. So I actually really like the Edmonds under. Like that's one I would be smashing across the board. And those are pretty much two strongest plays. So get those out of the way quick.
And I'll throw out my favorite is Mike Gesicki, the tight end for the Miami Dolphins. Another guy, his snap counts have been down. He is second to Durham Smythe on the depth chart with the Miami Dolphins now. Only played 17 snaps last week, 1 catch, 6 yards for Gesicki. So I would look at the yardage. You're looking at 30.5 yards for Gesicki. He's not playing much, not getting much of an opportunity. The projections are in favor of this, giving it a 77% chance on the under. So I would look at that as well. It's another one where you're trying to find these backups sometimes. And these are the players that, as Geoff talked about a few weeks back, that people don't necessarily jump on. Everyone's playing the quarterbacks, things like that. You make yourself a little different. And you get guys that are in the doghouse. They're not getting the opportunity. And that's an easy way to get under.
Absolutely. I will say one thing about Gesicki. Mm-hmm. It might be, if I was going to pick one of these props, because I think the unders on all these would be popular, I would probably take his to go over as like a contrarian move for the simple fact that the Bengals really suck guarding against the middle of the field. That's their Achilles heel. Like I like Edmonds to go over as receiving props. We don't have them, I don't think, on No House. Unfortunately, we only have his rushing, but Gesicki I think he could get there tonight. It's not projecting as strong for us. Beats right to like the under. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying again, on No House, we got the pick'em contest. You're going up against a bunch of different players. If you feel like the whole field's just going to be on Gesicki under, taking an over on him, not the worst idea, but it's definitely like a long shot. The under is the favorite there. So just wanted to throw that out. We do have a defense that really funnels towards the middle of the field here. And it's something to think about just in terms of all your play tonight, bet, props, DFS. I think those receptions for the Dolphins running backs will probably be there. I'm thinking it's going to be Edmonds, but really like that's just me guessing. So that's, again, you start with the running backs and tight ends. I don't know where you want to go from here, but that's I think those are strong plays, to fade those big props. So.
Well, those are the biggest plays on the board, the best plays on the board. We've covered the best plays on the board in terms of our projections, and then it comes, where can you get a little different? Let me ask you this then. Are there some game flow things that you think work? Like, if the Dolphins are going to be playing from ahead, what would line up with that kind of game? Or if the Bengals are going to be playing from ahead, what do you line up? I like looking at the interceptions often with the quarterbacks and hitting the over. If you think that team's going to lose, you got to pass more, take some chances late in the game. Maybe you are behind because the quarterback make a bad decision. What are you looking at in terms of, correlating some things in addition to those top picks?
So I think that obviously if the Bengals are the favorite and if you're projecting them to be ahead, a lot of people be focused on the receiving props, but obviously Joe Mixon, 70.5 rushing yards. I mean, we have Joe Mixon projected for pretty close to this. It's obviously an under, and it is a juice prop. I mean, like I said, the total is bigger than you'd find in a book, but that'll just push people towards the under. So I think it's a great point you bring up, like the game flow with no house advantage. You really have to play these props and especially your lineups, how you think the game's going to go. If you're playing for the Cincy lead, you got to be a little bit careful on, how many and who you're taking over. Like, I mean, Joe Mixon, if they get ahead, he could just push for 25 carries and end up, just beating his prop, and maybe the receivers all both go under. So I think that's going to be a contrarian move to take both wide receivers on Cincy to go under, but their props are juiced up too. Like we have Jamar Chase at 85.5. I mean, it's like 75.5 across the industry. So, I mean, I like Chase in this matchup. I think that if anyone is going to destroy tonight and go for like 100 and a touchdown or like 150 yards or something, it's going to be Jamar Chase in this game of all the wide receivers. I do like him the most, but there's something to be said for, we got a lot of star players in this game, and there's a lot of players who you could potentially take over this game, and Mixon is one of them. So, playing Joe Mixon over with some unders on the receiving side of it, yeah, absolutely. That is something you could do. And I'll point out too, like Tyler Boyd is a player we actually have as a pretty neutral projection. So someone else at 45.5 who's been playing well. He's just a good player, and this Miami pass defense is not something we should be scared of, which is why I like Chase so much. They're down there with like Arizona and Detroit and Tennessee in terms of just like yards allowed, yards per attempt allowed, passer rating against. It's hard for me to see a game here where, at least one of these Bengals wide receivers doesn't have a big game, even if Mix is involved. So Boyd at 45.5 is interesting. I would definitely lean over on that.
Yeah, Boyd coming off big game against the Jets, and Jamar Chase didn't do much in that game. I didn't watch. I couldn't tell you if Sauce Gardner was just locked in on Jamar Chase the whole game, but we've seen that be a factor early on in those games against the Jets for the number one receivers that have faced them. But yeah, it was Boyd who went off for 105 yards this past week. And there are just so many weapons for Cincinnati. We'll get into that Bengals passing game right after I tell you about this. You can get access to all of our Stokastic Plus NFL tools for showdown and single game slates. That's convenient for tonight on Thursday Night Football for just $1. You can click the link in the description of this video below or use promo code PRIMETIME at checkout to get 1 week of our NFL Primetime package for only $1. This includes full access to all the premium content and tools for NFL DFS that we have to offer for showdown, for single game slates, including player projections, ownership projections, top plays, lineup builder, our expert Discord. I love playing with the leverage, so you can check all that out. This offer is only valid through September 29th. That's today, so get on it. And please note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on, is not included with this promo. Again, promo code PRIMETIME, Stokastic Plus NFL tools for just $1 for showdown and single game slates, which helps you out Thursday night tonight, Sunday night, Monday night. You got at least 3 big showdowns to be looking at each week. So let's get into this Bengals passing game a little bit. Let's start with Burrow, and then we'll delve it back into the receivers a little bit. Burrow, 275.5 passing yards, a little high, 1.5 passing touchdowns, half an interception. Also rushing yardage on here at 14.5. Didn't have a single rushing yard last week, but was over that the previous 2. What jumps out at you if you're going to jump on Joe Burrow one direction or another here?
Yeah. So I definitely am on the Bengals side of it tonight, but I do think there's 2 different ways to play it. And I mentioned the Mixon over prop. I think if we're going over Mixon, you've got to lean under on the Burrow. Like you just do. I mean, like Mixon, I think to hit that 70.5, he's going to have to just have too many carries. And I think you're playing for a game where the Bengals take control early. Miami just comes out flat. They're beat up. They just don't do much. And it's kind of like a boring, like 24-10 game, and the Bengals win. And I think that's a scenario. And that's not a scenario that I don't like playing for, but in that scenario, like I'm going to lean with the projection here, which is a slight under. And I could see Burrow just topping out at 260 simply because the attempts aren't there. But I also think there's a very likely scenario where, Burrow is going up against, it's a bad secondary. Like they're like I just mentioned all those stats. They're giving up great passer ratings. They're just an inefficient secondary, which means I think Burrow's in for a pretty efficient game. And I think that, just what Miami has been doing on offense and what they have to offer, I think they're probably going to put up enough of a fight that Burrow gets over. So I do actually lean this as an overplay, even though we have it projected as an under. Taking into account, we're thinking game theory, we're thinking, this is a DFS play. This isn't just a straight up prop bet that we're making 50-50. I don't mind like going with a Burrow over and pairing him with one or two. Like I mentioned, the Boyd prop I like, and then, maybe you fade Higgins tonight. I think that especially for the contest, more people will be apt to take the over on Higgins than Chase, for the simple fact that it's 10 yards less. We just saw T Higgins with a big game. I know people are throwing out like, the yards per fantasy, or the fantasy points per whatever per game with Higgins and Chase is very similar, but Chase is the dude he just goes off. He's just, and I think against a secondary, like I'm actually fine doing it. I think it's going to be a contrarian move to go Burrow and Chase over, because I think most people will be looking to maybe just either avoid Chase or go under on it. So that's two ways to play it. I lean the fact that I think there'll be enough yards there for Burrow to get over. I think he's going to have a good game. They just looked a little bit more confident last week, and now you've got like kind of a prove it spot where, everyone's talking about Tua, and Burrow's just kind of like, it's almost like people have just written him off because he had like a slow start to the year. So I look at this as a good chance that Burrow gets over. And I think the other thing is, like, this works into the Miami passing game. I think like Tua can get there as well in a game where Burrow is going over. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of garbage yards for Tua. And again, like, let's not forget, good pass catching backs, Bengals weak against the middle of the field. He could just be getting there from dump offs late in the game or something. So I don't necessarily hate the Tua over either, but there's multiple ways you can play it. I just think with so many like star players in this game where you've got to think, one leads to the other. The mixing over probably leads to a Burrow under, but I do think there's definitely worlds where Burrow goes over and drags a couple of his receivers with him. So,
well, let's look at it this way, right? Like, how do the Bengals want to play tonight? The Bengals, they'd be more than happy if it's Joe Mixon carrying the ball 25 times,
yeah, absolutely,
grinding this thing out, and they don't have to do too much through the air. The Dolphins, the way they've played this year under Mike McDaniel, I mean, they want to have a track meet. They want to go up and down the field. They're going to be quick with the ball on offense. You're looking at a lot of opportunities on both sides offensively. It's probably why, some of those numbers against in the passing game don't look so great, because Miami, they put up some points on offense, a lot of yards, 6 touchdowns a couple of games ago for Tua.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like they throw a lot on first down as well, which is kind of why I bring up like the Gesicki prop as well. I mean, it's one of those things where I think you could see, I'm not sure if I wouldn't be as confident taking Miami across the board for overs, but I think you could see a couple of them pop as well. So, we got Tyreek Hill at 80, which is a massive number. I'd probably be more prone to fade him than the Bengals wideouts, but and then Waddle is on here. He's at 75, which is, again, it's about 10 yards bigger. So I have less confidence in going over with either of the Miami wideouts, that's for sure. But there's definitely a scenario where even if Miami is getting beaten this game, just that one pass for either of these guys, maybe it's 24-10 and then all of a sudden it's 24-7 because Waddle takes it 60 or Tyreek takes it 60. So,
I mean, Tyreek Hill, both these guys really, they take a wide receiver screen to the house and pick up 60 yards in one shot.
Both have done
right?
it already this year, have done similar things. So yeah, it feels dangerous to take Miami unders across the board. It really does. You've kind of got to pick and choose your spots. And like, I admit, I'm not sure like how much the projections are necessarily going to help us here. I think Waddle's, I will say this about the projections, Waddle's is way too big. Tyreek's is big, but like Waddle's is like, we're talking like a 10+ yard split here. So if you're going over on someone, probably play the big game for Tyreek. He also doesn't have the questionable tag. I think that if I was going to lean over on one player, it would be Tyreek. We have projected for like a decent total. It's just, the prop at 80.5 is a lot bigger. So again, when you're making lineups, if you're playing the Chase over and you're playing the Burrow over, I definitely understand being contrarian and going over on one of these Miami wide receiver totals as well. And I think that'll be the contrarian move, because again, these are so big that even the casual players would be like, wow, that's a lot. So I think Tyreek would probably be the guy for me, but it's not necessarily a move that I would be like putting all my money on either. So.
And Dolphins an underdog in this game as well, with the banged up quarterback and Tua Tagovailoa we'll get into next.
Yeah.
But if you're not familiar with No House Advantage, get an idea of how the contests work, you have to select 7 props out of 11 or 12 players, and each player has different props on the board. And you rank them in terms of how confident you are and what they're going to get done, right? 7 points for your top pick, 6, 5, all the way down. There is some game theory to this, as Geoff has alluded to, because you're not just trying to get 7 of 7, which is great, but you're also competing against other people. And if you want to be a little different at the top of the leaderboard and get that full 25K tonight, that's a good way to make that happen. I'm sorry, 15K tonight. So, a couple of different ways to think about it. You can also test your skills versus the house and hit 20 times your entry if you hit all of your picks. So you can check that out, mix in other sports as well. Sign up now with the link below, and you get a first match deposit bonus of up to $50. So they've upped that. So be sure to check that out. Also see our NFL lineup generator for No House Advantage, which you can find in the video description below. Daily fantasy sports has been redefined with No House Advantage, so check it out now. As far as Tua goes, I mean, how concerned are you with him coming off the head injury, back injury, whatever we're calling that? He's got a leg injury as well. There's no rushing prop on the board here, but if you don't like Miami in this game, again, I'll point to that interception number. He threw interceptions in 8 of 13 games he played in last year, only 1 of 3 so far this year. But if you're playing Mixon to run the ball a lot, maybe you can play Tua over on the interceptions with that kind of game flow. What do you like with Tua here?
Yeah, and this is why, I mean, again, there's definitely scenarios where, I mean, Miami's fine, and we don't, let's not pretend we know everything that's going on with Tua, but like I definitely have my concerns that this Dolphins offense maybe just throws in like a stinker, like they can't do anything. Tua throws a couple picks early. It's looking bad, and they just end up like running out the clock or something, like, because it's like Thursday. Okay, guys, let's take our lumps and go. I think that's a scenario for this game. I really do. I think, coming off the Bills game, this is tough, man. Like, Bengals are going to be up for this game. They need it. They want to stay ahead with Baltimore. They want to get back to 500. Again, you got the Tua versus Burrow thing. Like, I mentioned this with the receivers. Like, I know that there's scenarios here where this turns into a track meet, but I would lean under. I really would. And I would lean over on the interception prop too. I like that one. I think that, with the heat that Miami's getting just as a team, I don't think that the unders on Tua are going to be like that popular a play, but he's projected around 253. It's not like the strongest under, but it's definitely, again, it's not like we're saying this is way too low or anything like that. So yeah, I think that Tua, for me, just it's more of like a personal preference, but I think that this is a spot where Miami probably, I don't know if you want to call it a blowout or just like, I just don't think that it's going to be their night. So I think that's a realistic scenario to play for, where Tua goes under, he throws a pick, you pair those together, and then, like Jalen Waddle just takes a rest because he's banged up. The Dolphins are behind. Kind of like what we saw with the Tennessee game against Buffalo. Like, I mean, maybe not to that extent where like Malik Willis is coming in, but a little bit similar to that. That's just, I think, a realistic scenario to play for. And that's why another reason to like the under on Tua.
And you get to play multiple lineups too, right? So, that could be
absolutely.
one of your lineups. Hey, Bengals are just going to decimate them tonight. I'm going over on Mixon rushing. I'm going over on Tua interceptions. And then you can fade Waddle and work your way down the list and look at what the options are. Maybe that's one where you get to Piron and say, hey, maybe he gets enough carries to get to 20 rushing yards, and everybody's running the ball for Cincinnati. Yeah,
and like the one thing that's tricky about playing that, and I do like the Dolphins unders, obviously, but the other side of it would be a little bit tough because, you can play the Mixon over, but then it's like, what do you do with Burrow? Because, I mean, if like, they could just get there. They could just go to, play a little bit of, just put some easy points, right? Like it's a little tricky, but I still like playing for that scenario. It's probably just with what we have on the board and stuff, my favorite way to play it. But as you mentioned, there's multiple ways to play it. But if you're playing for that kind of scenario, yeah, I mean, the unders on Tua to me is like kind of an obvious. So.
Yeah. So Tua Tagovailoa is expected to suit up tonight, and we'll see if there are any surprises. You mentioned Waddle has a questionable tag as well. Now, you don't want to get cute on No House Advantage. If a guy's not going to play in the game, get him the heck out of your lineup, because you're going to take a loss on that if the player does not play. So be sure to check out the inactives in case we get any kind of surprise. But I think as of now, we're all expecting Waddle to play, and we're expecting Tua Tagovailoa to get the opportunity in this game as well. We talked about Chase Edmonds being under on the rushing yardage and that being something that you like. What about Raheem Mostert? He saw more snap count last week, and you are minimizing that a little bit. But what is the scenario where Mostert gets over on his rushing yardage here at 40.5?
Yeah, and this is actually one prop where it's not that much bigger than the books. We do have him projected as an under, but with the volume he took, and I do think like he's the preferred early down back for Mike McDaniel right now. Like I think that's one thing that I think will shine through. He'll probably outtouch Edmonds from a rushing standpoint the rest of the way, but like you've got to play for, I don't even like, I guess you're playing for like a slower paced kind of like Dolphins win with Mostert, which again, with the way their defense has been playing and just going up against Jamar Chase and T Higgins, obviously it's football, like anything can happen, but that to me is like one of the least likely outcomes that the Dolphins just come and run the ball. And we get like a 2017 game where it's like Mostert and Edmonds are getting like, 12, 15 rushes each. I will say that it's like, if you're going to play that, then it's going to be really unique, like with Mostert and maybe taking some unders in the passing game. But it's not a scenario I necessarily like to play for. So Mostert to me I think is actually a good under. Mm-hmm. I think taking both the Dolphins running backs might even be a good underplay. But just we're talking about his prop and him. I definitely prefer going over on, like, if you're telling me which back is more likely to hit their over on the rushing yards, like I just don't see many scenarios where Edmonds gets there. Like he's going to have to break a couple big runs or something.
They haven't shown it this year either, right? I mean, Miami is the short passing game. They have all this explosive speed on the outside. They haven't depended on Mostert or Edmonds at all. The biggest game for either of them was 51 rushing yards for Mostert, which isn't that far from this line.
Yeah, and again, like he'd need a positive game script, right, to do it. So
big time,
which is no guarantee at all. I think going under on both the Miami running backs, definitely I prefer. But Mostert is someone you could at least, sprinkle into lineups and make a contrarian for sure on an overside.
So you get a little bit of a feel for our picks, and you can use these as well versus the house. So then you don't have to worry about the game theory aspect of it as much, but you certainly want to correlate some things together. So you can check that out, of course, at No House Advantage as well, and put in some picks in that area. But the big contest tonight, $15K to first place. We've seen some solo winners already this season, so be sure to check that out. And there's been a lot of overlay at No House Advantage, and they actually expanded the contest this Thursday night to $2,400. The entry fee is down a little bit, so we'll see how that shakes out. But worth throwing a lineup in now and then take a look at 7 o'clock, and maybe you want to go in a little heavier on that. We'll see how it shakes out as the night goes on. Appreciate you guys joining us. Give us a like, subscribe to our shows. Our DFS offers giveaways and much more, so you can be on top of all of it. And once you do subscribe, hit that notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. And we have a lot more content coming up throughout the day here. MLB live before lock coming your way at 5:30 Eastern. Got a mini slate tonight for MLB, and then right back on the NFL wagon from a showdown perspective with a deeper dive starting up at 6:30 Eastern. Geoff, pleasure once again. I'm Pete McCarthy. Everyone take care.